right, welcome back to Nippon Bridge's Moving to Japan podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Great to have you with us, and we'll get right into it today. I thought it'd be a good idea to break down the components and the procedures that are involved in moving here for anyone interested. So we know that it's really not a simple process anywhere in the world, let alone here, where things can be a lot more bureaucratic than in many other countries, and the language barrier is a real thing. Plus, if that's not enough, there are also plenty of more nuanced language and cultural barriers that do play a part in all of these tasks, which anyone moving here always runs up against, whether they're prepared for it or not. So that's exactly why being prepared is so much better. So all of this relates both to people relocating on their own or via smaller employer hires, as well as for larger corporations who are mobilizing larger talent pools. Some things could be easier to manage on a larger scale, and other solutions might be available to these companies if they're really moving around a larger number of people. But all of these boxes do need to be ticked regardless of who's doing the actual relocation support work. So I thought it might be a good idea to break it all down for you here. So putting aside employment and visa matters, which are of course the first steps, but not really something that we or other companies like ours can help with really. Once you do know that you're relocating to Japan and you do have a work and visa sorted, here's what you're going to have to do next. Now, some of these items on the checklist, as you're going to find out in a moment, are not really official or mandatory as such, so not super necessary, but they are still very much recommended, especially if you've never lived in or even been to Japan before. These things will most definitely help you with all of the decisions you'll need to make along the way. So we here at Nippon Bridge, as a relocation support professional or destination services provider, which is the official industry term for what we do, always like to start off with a short consultation or interview with the person relocating. And the reason for that is mainly for us to find out about their individual situation and how familiar they are with Japan already. In some cases, like with remote workers or digital nomads of various sorts, they might have the option to live anywhere in Japan, or at least pick from a few possible locations to settle down in. And if you're not going through a relocation support service like ours, it is probably still a very good idea to have at least some conversations with people who are already living and working in Japan, preferably in the locations that you're moving to or considering moving to, just so that you can hear from someone who's already been there, done that, so to speak, and is living or at least familiar with life in the place that you're going to be moving to. And different people will have different considerations as far as picking a city to live in goes. So your decision on potential cities and potential locations within those cities, especially for larger ones like Tokyo or Osaka, will probably vary a lot depending on a bunch of factors. So your age, your family circumstances, are you coming on your own or with a partner? Are you coming with children? Then again, based on the children's ages as well, how important is public transport to you? Do you want to or need to own a car when you're living in Japan? Do you prefer urban, more rural locations, more suburban, more central? Are you feeling more comfortable in close proximity to something like shopping, nightlife, or culture? Or do you prefer the quiet and you're more a cabin in the woods type person or family? Have you been here before? Do you speak, read, or write the language at all? Are you interested in international schools and kindergartens for your kids? Private versus public education, and there are so many choices involved here, dietary, health-related restrictions, and so on and so forth. All of the above will make a difference in how a professional relocation company will approach your case and the suggestions that they're going to make to you. And even without the company being involved, it will definitely make a difference in your own choices as you have them, because you want to focus on the locations that will best complement your own preferred lifestyles and make your stay here more comfortable and enjoyable. So if you don't know anyone, social media is a great place to hit for these conversations. English language Facebook groups and other online forums usually name something like expats in Tokyo or foreigners in Nagoya. They're a good place to start. If you also want to draw on the experience of people with the same national background as you, you'll often find smaller groups that cater specifically to expats from your country of origin. There might not be one per city, but there are definitely groups out there like Italians living in Japan and so forth. Definitely worth checking them out. Read the posts, ask the questions, connect with people way ahead of your official arrival date. Very much recommended. So following that, and depending again on how many of you are arriving, what you'll be carrying with you, and whether or not you have children on board, it's a very good idea to at least be aware of, if not book in advance, the airport pickup or transportation services on arrival. Obviously not a must. If your initial accommodation is in any major Japanese city, it's going to be relatively easy to find the local train or subway or taxi to take you to your destination. But if services like trains and public transport are not as readily available and you do need to take a taxi, that could be quite expensive. And also, depending on the size of your family and the size of your luggage, it might be something to consider booking in advance, or again, at least familiarizing yourself with in advance, just to make your arrival smoother and less tiring. Okay, so assuming you've had a relatively soft landing, you know a bit about the location you've arrived at, maybe some potential areas within that city that you may want to live in, the next step you would think would be to find a place to live. But not so fast. In Japan, your residential address is actually deeply tied into a lot of the services that will be available to you, especially from government entities. So the choice of public and private schools, the bank branch that you'll be opening a bank account in, even utilities and infrastructures can differ depending on location, and much, much more. So before we actually go and rent a home, we definitely want to confirm which areas we're interested in within that city or these cities that we're thinking to relocate to. Now, even if the choice of location is more or less dictated to you, for example, you have a particular school that you want to attend for the kids, or you want to be within a certain distance from the office, other landmarks within the city, whatever the case may be, there are still bound to be a few options at least available to you. For example, if you're in Tokyo and you need to commute daily to Shinjuku or Shibuya, and you want to be within 30 minutes from the office, you've still got dozens of neighborhoods or more to choose from that all satisfy that requirement, right? So you want to make sure that which ward offices each of these different neighborhoods that you're considering belong to, because you will need to attend those particular ward office or city hall, if you will, to sign up for various services. And also you want to have those conversations either with professionals or local folks, like we've just discussed a few minutes ago, to have an idea of which areas in the city might be more interesting or preferable for you. And as much as you want to move out of your temporary accommodation as soon as possible to save on funds and to move into your new home, it's a good idea to at least dedicate one day to walking around these neighborhoods, just to get to feel of what the neighborhood might be like. Imagine yourselves living there. And that will also help you and your agent, who will be helping you find the property, focus your search on these areas in order of priority that you find most attractive to live in. And also, if there's somebody local showing you around, that's great, but don't be shy to just walk the streets on your own. You'll usually get a pretty good feel for what a Japanese neighborhood is like just by wandering the streets for 20-30 minutes. Not a bad idea to do that before you actually prioritize the list of locations that you want your property agent to look for. Now, just as a side note on the topic of visas and resident cards, if you've arrived in Japan on a non-visitor visa, meaning you're not a tourist, you're normally going to get your residence card at the airport upon arrival. But if you've arrived via a smaller airport which doesn't have robust immigration facilities, which can happen depending on where you're flying in from and to, you'll need to first visit your local ward office before all of this process within the first 14 days from arrival to register that temporary address and receive your residence card. You'll then visit them again whenever you move into a new residence, and that's going to be in a different ward potentially. So it'll be a different ward office, just something to be aware of. Okay, so next step. Once you've identified, prioritize the potential areas that you might want to start your house search in. And that's assuming, of course, that you don't already have this sorted out ahead of arrival, as would be the case if you're being relocated by a larger employer that maybe already has some dorms or can organize housing for you. But assuming you don't have that, the next step would then be to find a place to live, hopefully in your highest ranked area or at least close to it. Now, there are endless articles and blog posts and social media content and video and audio content talking about how challenging it is for foreigners to rent properties in Japan. And that is unfortunately very true. But each of the major cities at least would have at least one or two property agents who can and do cater to foreigners. In the case of Tokyo or Osaka, maybe a handful or a dozen or so, but they're still very limited by the very low percentage of landlords who actually agree to lease their properties to foreigners, and particularly foreigners like yourselves who are new in Japan and don't yet have the income history, the personal guarantors, and all of the other local resources that landlords and property agents normally ask potential tenants for. Now, there are, of course, workarounds like guarantee companies instead of personal guarantors, advance rent payments and security deposits in lieu of an income history with a local employer, and so forth. But it's still relatively low percentage, not to say almost no, landlords who will even bother to consider these options, particularly when they have an infinitely larger pool of potential Japanese tenants that they can choose from. So what this all boils down to is that you should expect this process to take a lot longer than it would in most other countries, unfortunately. Now, this can be and usually is very frustrating to people moving to Japan. It's often quoted as one of the highest stress factors actually for relocating foreigners. And it's definitely one of the first and most annoying hurdles that people do come across when they move here. So it's super important to prepare yourself and your family in advance for a long string of rejections and slim pickings as far as potential properties are concerned. Much more so in smaller towns. That's very slowly changing for the better, but it is always probably going to remain a challenge, at least to some degree. So just something that you should wrap your head around, be mentally prepared for. It will take weeks at best, sometimes months, to actually find a long-term rental property to live in as a newly arrived foreigner in Japan. So make sure you're prepared for it, both financially and logistically. And also on the financial front, it's very expensive to move house in Japan. Even if you don't have to pay more than a month's rent in advance when you sign up for a new place, you will definitely need to fork out a large amount of cash in various fees, including one-time fees like the lease signing fee for changing the locks and the keys, security deposit, guarantee company sign-up fee, tenancy insurance, and so forth. Generally safe to assume something like 6 to 10 months of rent in total for every move, with only 1 or 2 of these months being potentially refundable at the end of the tenancy. Often there's not going to be anything at all refunded. So again, something to be prepared for in advance. Now, again, if you're working with a professional relocation services company like us here at Nippon Bridge or others like us, we'll take at least some of the footwork load off you. We'll already be in touch with local property agents who are willing to take on foreigners or have worked with foreigners in the past. So hopefully that first, most annoying part of the search, which is to find an agent who will actually agree to work with you, will hopefully be able to make it a lot easier, but the rest remains unchanged. Again, even these foreigner-friendly agents will still have to convince landlords to take you on as a tenant. And in many, if not in most cases, the landlords will decline. So allow at least, again, a few weeks or a month or two for this purpose and arm yourself with some patience. Most importantly, and there's no polite way to put this, try to avoid the typical Westerner style entitled meltdown and tantrums, which tend to occur when things are not working as expected in many, at least English-speaking countries that I'm familiar with. Because even a foreigner-friendly agent will stop working with you if you prove to be difficult like that. The work is challenging enough as it is. And Japanese clients simply don't behave in this way. They don't have a meltdown when they can't get what they want. So put on your big girl or big boy pants, recognize that you've moved to a country that has very little experience with expats moving in from other countries in most cases, and make sure not to take your frustrations out on the agent who's trying to help you. It is not their fault, it's just the way things work, or rather don't work here. Okay, so let's assume a few weeks or a month have passed, you finally managed to secure a residential lease for your new home. Now, while you're doing that, you don't have to sit on your hands. There are a few things that you can take care of during that period of time. The first thing, and this is something that you need for a bunch of procedures down the track as well, you'll need to get yourself a hanko or an inkan, which is the way official document signing is done in Japan. It's a personal stamp or seal that you'll be carrying around with you, or at least taking with you for important meetings when you need to sign documents and so forth. You can get those at inkan shops in any city, large or small, but the shops would normally only have typical Japanese names available for purchase at the store. So anything with your name on it, which is obviously not going to be a typical Japanese name, will need to be custom made, and you can get that done either at the store or more efficiently and probably cheaply online. So there are plenty of online inkan shops where you can have your stamp designed and created and shipped to you directly. But the vast majority of these, as most things in Japan, are going to be strictly in Japanese. So again, you'll need someone to help you with them. Once you've received your new inkan, you go right back to your local ward office again to register it, at which point you'll receive an official seal or stamp certificate. In Japanese, it's called an inkan chome. And you'll need that certificate in conjunction with your actual physical stamp to sign off on any official documentation, contracts, and so forth, whether it's to purchase a car or a home, to sign a tenancy lease, open a bank account, what have you. If you're going with a brick and mortar bank, we'll get to that in a moment. Okay, so once you've got the income, a couple more things you can do with it, even before you have a place to live sorted out. You can try to sign up for a bank account from a traditional brick and mortar bank branch. These will only take you on as a customer if you have an address certificate corresponding to the branch's address. So you can't, or if you have a name card showing that you're working in that area. So you can, for example, walk into a central Tokyo bank and ask them to open an account if your residence and your workplace are in different wards or different neighborhoods. They're very local, the brick and mortar banks in Japan. They're also far more strict as far as opening new accounts goes, not only for foreigners, but more so for foreigners. Definitely even for Japanese who have never had a bank account. It is challenging. They've got very strict anti-money laundering policies in place. They very rarely, almost never have any English-speaking staffers on hand. So again, you want to probably get a Japanese person to come and join you. Another thing you can do is, which is usually the easiest solution, is to sign up for an online bank account. There are plenty of those in the last few years in Japan. Sony Bank is one of the big ones that actually has full English help desk and online banking facilities. The entire sign-up process with an online bank is done on your phone. No stamp or seals or certificates required aside from your residence card and a few other documents. So probably the easiest way to go. They are limited in the services that they offer, so they're not going to necessarily enable you to open business accounts or to apply for mortgages or credit lines and so forth. So if you need this type of services, it might be a good idea to first sign up with an online bank. Then after a few months or a few years of working with that, and once you've got a bigger paper trail established in Japan, you can then try the brick and mortar bank option again. What else can you do while you're waiting for your new home? You can try to sign up with a mobile phone provider. Some of them will require a bank account, so you might need to do this after you have one, but others will allow you to sign up with just a credit or debit card. So it's a good idea, as with all of the things that we're discussing here today, to have a Japanese friend, colleague, or professional interpreter joining you when you go to check out your options. That tends to greatly simplify things, and it does make staffers feel more comfortable and try to help you out more. The ground floor of most electronic shops is where you'd find a bunch of these mobile providers with little stalls. They should be available to speak with, compare plans. And again, there's no harm in trying that even before you have a bank account set up. You should be able to get yourself a local phone number and go online with your mobile devices, even before you sign up for a fixed internet connection at your new home. Now, even before that, you might want to get yourself a tourist SIM card upon arrival, just because you'll need to be online to look at rental listings, exchange emails with property agents potentially, and so forth. Those you can get at the airport or again at the ground floor of any of the large electronics retailer stores, Big Camera, Yodobashi Camera, and so forth. Okay, so now that you got a place to live, you got a bank account, we can get on to the rest. Your first stop should be the local ward office, again, with your new residents to update your address and sign up for the various services that they can provide. And you can do that even before the bank account is approved. So you want to sign up for national medical insurance for yourself and your family, pension services, and now that you know where you live and hopefully where your kids will go to school, you can also begin the school registration process. So this normally means the ward office education department staffer will call and schedule a visit for you at the various schools that are available in your district as a first step. You can go there, meet with the principal, tour the facilities, and then once you've decided, you'll go back to the ward office to finalize the registration process, or in some cases that can be done directly at the school itself. Now, it's important to note that in Japan, senior high school, junior high school, elementary school, and kindergarten day center are usually separate facilities and separate entities. So if you've got children that fit into more than one of these age groups and criteria, please allow for that process all over again. You won't be able to take them all into the same school. You might have to go to different schools. So again, it would take longer. Now, also bear in mind, now that you've got the keys to your new home, you can sign up for utilities. So power, water, gas supply if required and if available, depending on location, and the fixed unlimited fast home internet connection. In certain properties, if it's a countryside house, for example, there might not be city sewage facilities, in which case you'll have a septic tank. You'll also want to get in touch with a septic tank maintenance company who will come in and do their thing once or twice a year. And lastly, to handle the move itself, if you've got household goods in storage somewhere in Japan, you'll need to contact a local Japanese moving company. They're very competitive. Their prices are usually quite low and very negotiable. Don't be shy to shop around. And Japanese being Japanese, they're all going to be very tidy, pad out the holes in the house to avoid scratching the walls, take their shoes off every time they're carrying a new item, which is mind-boggling and entertaining to look at. But you don't need to be concerned about going for a cheaper service. They're all going to be of at least reasonable professional quality. Now, one last thing that first-time residents in Japan often need help with here is the school shopping. So Japanese schools and kindergartens normally have a huge list of goods that you will need to provide to your children every day when they attend school. And these are all very precise in the list of materials and colors and sizes. So it'll never be a towel. It'll always be a black, blue, or yellow towel sized 15 by 23 centimeters and so forth. So most department stores are familiar with what local schools in their area need, but it can take time to explain yourself and then to find the right item. So again, a person fluent in Japanese, if possible, to review these lists with you and then help you shopping for them can be super helpful. Now, the process is obviously a lot more nuanced. Each and every city or ward office has at least slightly different regulations and requirements and forms for the way that things should be done. And the way things should be done is always a very big thing in Japan. There's no winging it. Everything has to be done by the book, and there are plenty of different books that need to be studied and followed. What we normally add on to a relocation support package for our clients are a few small but useful components like 3-hour basic Japanese class to help people learn the most common phrases and words that would help them navigate all of these procedures. A short half-day seminar on cultural orientation and etiquette, which again are things that are very important to the Japanese and are therefore crucial in Japan. They don't have much experience or tolerance for people who are not doing things the right way. So probably not a bad idea to try and get yourself into one of these immersion types, workshops or seminars, if they're available to you. They should be in any larger city. And lastly, it's a good idea to sign up or have some agreement with someone who can assist with day-to-day management of correspondence. So Japan is, to this day, very much obsessed with paperwork. And you'll regularly be receiving notices, forms, requests for information from any official entity that you're in contact with, insurance companies, owner unions in case of a condo unit, or mansions as they're called here, local residents associations in your neighborhood, utility companies, especially schools. So schools will bombard you with paper on an almost daily basis, particularly in the earlier years of education. And while most of these things that they're writing about don't seem particularly important to people like us, nobody really cares about the exact right path to follow to school based on age group and home address and so forth. But unfortunately, for one, some of these are important, but the main thing is your kids will be sent home, or they'll just stand out, or they even might be pointed out publicly by their teachers if they don't comply with any of these requests. And that's really adding oil to the flame of already being singled out due simply to being the single or one of only a few foreign kids in their school. So firstly, pick your battles. Don't be that pesky foreign parent who constantly insists on doing things the way they were done back home. It will backfire onto your kids. I'm not saying do not stand up on important issues. Definitely do that. But again, pick your battles. And secondly, at least until you're more fluent in the language, or at least until your kids become more fluent in the language, which usually happens a lot earlier than the parents are, it might be a good idea to, again, have a local friend, acquaintance, colleague, or service. In our case, you can get that service from us. Someone who can help you make heads and tails of the mountains of paperwork that you're going to be receiving every month. So again, we provide this service as part of our relocation packages, but if that kind of service is not available to you and there is no personal acquaintance that you can turn into in your immediate surroundings for this kind of help, probably a good idea, at least for school correspondence, to get real friendly, real fast with the local PTA, Parents Teachers Association. In Japan, that's going to be entirely or almost entirely made out of moms. You almost never see a male parent taking part in PTA groups and activities. Get on their good side by participating in whatever volunteer activities they're organizing, and there's going to be plenty of those. Join their local Line messaging group. Line is the prevalent instant messenger platform used here in Japan, in case you were wondering, and politely ask for their assistance. They would usually be more than willing to help. and it will make your life here, at least for the first few years, a whole lot easier. And that's probably it, at least as far as the first steps are concerned. Japan is kind of like an onion, to copy a Shrek and donkey metaphor, in the sense that there are layers upon layers upon layers of official and social norms and practices that are just not really evident or visible until you've lived here for a while and had a chance to witness them firsthand. But hopefully this gives you at least an idea of the basics that everyone needs to go through when they first arrive here. And again, companies like ours here at Nippon Bridge and others like us can really help in these first few months, which can be quite overwhelming. So don't be shy to reach out to us if you've got any questions, or you want to find out how much it would cost you or your company to utilize our services for a smoother arrival and a settling in process. Probably is a lot cheaper than you think, and we believe at least well worth it. Hope this helps some of you out there. Please let us know if you think we've missed anything, if there's anything that you wanted us to speak about that we haven't, and we'll happily put out an update to this episode as well, paint a fuller picture for you. We're here to make things easier. Now, if you found value in this podcast, we'd really love it if you could like, subscribe, and even better, share the episode with anyone in your network who might also find value in it. And of course, leave us a review or a comment wherever you might have found this podcast. Your word of mouth is our oxygen, and it helps us reach more and more and more people who might find value in the topics that we cover here. We love hearing from you. And of course, if you want to be on the podcast, either as a sponsor, we can definitely put you in the ears of anyone interested in moving to Japan, or even better, as a guest, either via recorded conversation or just send in your questions, audio, video, written form. We'll try to give you the answers you're looking for. Just drop us a line here in the comment section or via DM or on email, info@nipponbridge.com. That's info, info@NIPPON, nipponbridge.com. All one word. We want to know what you think. Hope to have you with us again next time. And until then, have a great day or night ahead. Yoroshiku.